Brandon Flood, 39 years old, and I live here in Lower Paxton, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I was super active, both physically as well as politically. And for anyone who knew me, they knew me either for community service or for public policy making. I had a statewide position overseeing the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons, so I traveled very much so across the Commonwealth. I went to speak to a prisoner population at SCI Green. I was there for about 3 hours, had 2.5-hour presentations. Barely made it through the presentations, but and that's about 5 hours from Harrisburg, that drive. So I made the drive up, and then when I tried to make the drive back, all in the same day. I had to pull over at least twice to kind of take like a cat nap. I made my way to the hospital thinking it was COVID, of all things, at worst, and never would I imagine that they would have said that it was heart issues or heart failure. And they said, hey, listen, your heart is operating about 15% of its full capacity. And so it's probably maybe about a week or two where the subject of a heart transplant really started to emerge and started to be part of the daily conversation. So my main thing was getting my affairs in order. So making sure I had my will in place, making sure that my life insurance, the folks that were supposed to be listed as beneficiaries, it wasn't too difficult for me, but for the beneficiaries, no one wants to have that conversation or kind of come to terms with, hey, things may go awry. At the end of the day, surgery, they kind of gave me what the odds were. So I wanted to be able to make sure that if in the event that the odds weren't in my favor, that at least I had my affairs in order. But they did say that once the transplant was done, it took them about 3 times to get my heart started back up again. I didn't remember that point. I just remember waking up in the ICU, just figuring, hey, I guess I survived, right? I've always been a very independent person. The whole time I was in the hospital, I tried to do as much as I could without assistance, but at that point I was kind of relegated to relying more upon the nursing staff. So, and just really at the end of the day, thinking about what does life look like for me, especially being as young as I am, following such a procedure. So, I had a little bit of time, I think maybe about 3 weeks after surgery before I was discharged. So I had some time to think about, what that would look like for me. I always like to be the best representation of myself. Immediately after being discharged from the hospital, I felt like I wasn't that. Not so much mentally, but physically, and I guess in some cases superficially. The most depressing part after being released was coming home and finding out that, I lost a considerable amount of weight, about 35 pounds. So I couldn't fit any of my clothes, and I consider myself someone, as a clothes horse. I have a ton of clothes, right? And I wear a lot of suits and jackets, and I couldn't fit any of them. I almost felt like a kid with some of those jackets on. And this was something I didn't know about, and the conversation about, medical history, my family's very much fragmented, so I don't know what ailments, that are hereditary that I may potentially have to deal with. I have 3 sons now, so I've had those conversations with them. That once they told me it was a congenital disease, that was the first thing of learning, hey, this wasn't something that I guess I contracted later in life. This was something I was born with that apparently was dormant for 39 years. So I dealt with sleep apnea, and I know a few of folks that had the pleasure or displeasure of laying next to me have told me on quite an occasion that I snored excessively loud and that my breathing was very labored during those periods. So I think that was probably the biggest telltale sign. I'm sure there are a ton of people out there who were just like me, who feel like, hey, listen, I don't need to take any medication. I'll just walk it off or let things subside on their own. But listen to your body, because, I had thought about admitting myself into the emergency room a week prior. I just didn't do so because I felt like, hey, I would be able to walk it off. Luckily, and then I said my heart was operating at 15% capacity, right? So in some cases, you may not have that additional week to figure that out or to find that out, so to speak. So I would tell people to support the American Heart Association because, knowledge is power. I know that's a cliche line, but and we live in a digital world, so we're competing with a lot of information thrown at us. Hey, if I didn't come to one of your events, we wouldn't be having this conversation now. So I look at this as having a second lease on life. And I usually tell people, in terms of how my life has changed, or because that's usually the biggest question, how do you feel? I usually tell them, if you ask me today, I feel about 80% physically, but mentally I feel about 150%, because it definitely caused me to put a lot of things into perspective. Not so much like, hey, I want to cherish each day, but more so I want to kind of maximize my time on this earth. Legacy was a big thing for me, and I felt like at least the 39 years I've been on this planet, I at least have left a pretty considerable legacy given the time I had. So for me right now, it's really kind of fortifying that. People tell me, hey, you should slow down and take it easy, and for me, I kind of feel like I'm going to ratchet things up, but within reason, of course. But I'm definitely planning on being more active, if that is even a thing.